This is a vice grip clamp that I made from wood. Now, if you want to build one of these for yourself, I have a template very similar to the one I used here to go from, and that's free to download. You can get that in the build article on my website. Just follow the link in the description. First thing to do is to cut out the parts from the template, and these don't have to be cut out perfectly. However, whenever possible, I'm going to trim it to the line on a straight edge and use a straight cut on the piece of plywood and glue it down to that. And to glue these down, I'm just using one of these glue sticks. Now, it's worth mentioning that everything that I've got marked 1/4 inch here, I'm cutting out of 1/2 inch plywood, and everything that's marked 1/2 inch, I'm cutting out of 3/4 inch plywood. I'm going to try it this size. It may seem a little thick, but it's going to be a lot stronger, and I just want to try it and see how it works out. With the patterns glued down to the plywood, I'm going to take the time just to fine tune it a little bit, round over the corners so they won't be so sharp. And then when I get that done, I'm going to bring it over to the bandsaw and cut out the parts. I actually need 2 of these, but I didn't have the space on a single sheet of paper to fit in another one of these patterns, so I just marked on it that I need 2. Since I only have one template for these 2 parts, I'm going to temporarily pin them together, and that'll hold it until I can get it sanded smooth and the holes drilled out. In the mock-up that I built, I used 3/8 inch dowels just to test out the idea, to see if it actually works. But in this one, I'm going to upsize it to 7/16 for the hinge parts. So there'll be 3 of those, even though I'm cutting 4 here. I went ahead and I cut a 3/8 inch dowel after, and that'll fit into the slots that I'm going to cut next in these parts. I'm going to do that on the router table. I've got a 3/8 inch bit installed, and I've got a strip of tape here to show me where to start and stop. And I'm going to cut halfway through on the first pass and then finish it on the second. And I'm going to do that with both pieces. Let me break in here for a second and tell you about the Maker's Mob annual 72-hour summer sale, where you can get your first full month all access pass at almost 0 cost. For just 99 cents inside the Maker's Mob, you will not only learn from my woodworking tutorials, but also get exclusive access to 80+ woodworking projects from YouTube's top makers like Jimmy DiResta, The Samurai Carpenter, Liam Hoffman, Frank Howarth, John Peters, and Neil Paskin. They all have projects live and ready to watch inside the Maker's Mob. If you're watching this video before the end of the 72-hour sale, then this offer is still available. Simply click the link in the description below, and we'll all see you on the inside. With the parts tuned up and the holes drilled, I can take apart the 2 pieces that were pinned together, and then I'm going to glue the dowels in, and that would be centered on the 3/4 inch parts so that I have an equal amount sticking out on each side. I actually cut the dowels a little bit longer than they need to be, so I've got some extra. Not removing the paper turned out to be a mistake. Got a little bit ahead of myself. Dowels are a little bit too tight here, so I'm going to drill the holes just slightly oversized. I think this is a 29/64 inch bit, which is just a 64ths bigger than 7/16. With it put together, I can see that there's another area right at the front here that can be rounded over. So do that now before I go any further. The next thing I need to do is make the thing that adjusts this, and it's going to be driven by a 3/8 inch threaded rod, and I'm cutting that to length now. And that's going to be put into a piece of 3/4 inch plywood that matches the rest of the parts there in the middle. And I'm drilling a counterbore just big enough for a 3/8 inch nut. And then I'm going to drill the rest of the way through with the 3/8 inch bit. It would have been better if the block didn't split in half when I'm drilling through it. But it's no big deal. I can just glue it together with the same epoxy that I'm gluing the nut in with. I also need to glue a nut onto the end of the piece of threaded rod that I cut off. And this is what presses up on the end of the strut. I let the epoxy dry for about a half an hour, and now what I'm doing is I'm actually reducing the size of this block. I made it a little bit too big. You know, even though I made a mock-up and I made a template, this is still kind of a seat of the pants type build. And I'm working out the details as I go. So with that cleaned up, what I can do is I can thread in the threaded rod with the nut glued on the end, and then I can start actually putting the thing together. I'm going to, I don't have any names for these parts, so I'm just going to say this part to this middle part, which I actually had to extend. You can see the little piece I put on the end, and also the block that has the nut in it with the threaded rod sticking out the end. All right, next I need to put together these parts. So I'm just going to put this jaw part with one of the hockey stick parts and lay it on the other side that I haven't glued on yet. And then I've got that block that has the angle cut on the end, which apparently is too big and too long, but I'm going to glue it in anyway. So I'll get some glue on there and once again fire in some pins to keep it all together. I'm going to leave the glue to dry overnight, and then I'll finish this tomorrow. But before I wrap up for the day, I want to glue a small knob that I made onto the end of the threaded rod adjuster and leave that to sit overnight as well. It is the next day, and before I go any further with finishing this, I'm going to actually test it out and see how it works. I mean, there's not much point doing anything else if it doesn't work. But this looks pretty good. So basically all I have left to do is to first trim off these dowels that are too long, and I'm using my flush trim saw for that. And then I'm going to do a little bit of rounding over on the handle on my router table, and then of course the final sanding, and I'll put a coat of clear water-based polyurethane on to help keep it looking clean. Of course, it would have been a lot better to paint the parts before I put it together, but I think this is going to be okay. I'll just, exercise it, keep it moving, and that way it won't glue itself together with the finish. At least that's the plan, anyway.